Chapter 9, the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq and Iran. Physical geography. Did you know that not all deserts are made of sand? The Arabian Peninsula has the largest sand desert in the world, but it also has huge expanses of desert covered with bare rock or gravel. These wide desert plains are a common landscape in the region that includes the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq, and Iran. The countries of this region appear on the map in sort of a semicircle, with the Persian Gulf in the center. The Arabian Peninsula is bounded by the Gulf of Oman, the Arabian Sea, and the Red Sea. The Caspian Sea borders Iran to the north. The region contains four main landforms: rivers, plains, plateaus, and mountains. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers flow across low flat plain in Iraq. They join together before they reach the Persian Gulf. The Tigris and Euphrates are what are known as exotic rivers, or rivers that begin in humid regions that flow through the dry areas. The rivers create a narrow, fertile area, which in the ancient times was called Mesopotamia, or the land between the rivers. The Arabian Peninsula has no permanent rivers. The vast dry expanses of the Arabian Peninsula is covered by plains in the east. The peninsula's desert plains are covered with sand in the south and volcanic rock in the north. As you can see in the map, the surface of the peninsula rises gradually from the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. Near the Red Sea, the landscape becomes one of the plateaus and mountains with almost no coastal plain. The highest point on the peninsula is in the mountains of Yemen. Plateaus and mountains also cover most of Iran. In fact, Iran is one of the world's most mountainous countries in the west, and the land climbs sharply from the Zagros Mountain. The Elburz Mountains and the Kopet lie in the north. Historically, this mountainous landscape has kept towns there isolated from each other. Climate and vegetation. As you have already read, most of the region has a desert climate. The desert can be both very hot and very cold in the summer. Afternoon temperatures regularly climb to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. During the night, however, the temperature may drop quickly. Nighttime temperatures in the winter sometimes dip below freezing. The world's largest sand desert, the Rub al Khali, covers much of the southern Saudi Arabia. Rub al Khali means empty quarter, a name given to the area because there is so little life there. Sand dunes in the desert can rise to 800 feet high and stretch nearly 200 miles. In northern Saudi Arabia is the An Nafud, another large desert. These deserts are among the driest places in the world. The Rub al Khali receives an average of less than 4 inches of rainfall each year. Some plateau and mountain areas do get winter rains or snow. These higher areas generally have semi-arid steppe climates. Some mountains peak receive more than 50 inches of rain per year. Rainfall supports vegetation in some parts of the region. Trees are common in mountain regions and in scattered desert oases. An oasis is a wet, fertile area in a desert that forms where underground water bubbles to the surface. Most desert plants have adapted to survive without much rain. For example, the shrubs and grasses that grow in the region's dry plains have roots that either grow deep or spread out far to capture as much water as possible. Still, some places in the region are too dry or too salty to support any vegetation. Resources. Water is one of the region's two most valuable resources. However, the resource is very scarce. In some places in the desert, springs provide water. At the other places, water can come from wells dug into dry stream beds called wadis. Modern wells can reach water deep underground, but the groundwater in these wells is often fossil water. Fossil water is water that is not being replaced by rainfall. Well pumps that pump fossil water will eventually run dry. While water is scarce, the region's other important resource, oil, is plentiful. Oil exports bring great wealth to the countries that have oil fields. Most of the oil fields are located near the shores of the Persian Gulf. However, although oil is plentiful now, it cannot be replaced once it is taken from Earth. Too much drilling for oil now may cause problems in the future because most countries of the region are not rich in other resources. Iran is an exception with its many mineral deposits. Section 2. The Arabian Peninsula. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is by far the largest of the countries of the Arabian Peninsula. It is also a major religious and cultural center and has one of the region's strongest economies. People and customs. Nearly all Saudis and Arabs speak Arabic. This culture is strongly influenced by Islam, a religion founded in Saudi Arabia by Muhammad. Islam is based on submitting to God in all messages Muslims believe God gave to Muhammad. These messages are written in the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Nearly all Saudis follow one or of two main branches of Islam. Shia Muslims believe that true interpretation of Islamic teaching can only come from certain religious and political leaders, called imams. Sunni Muslims believe in the ability of the majority of the community to interpret Islamic teachings. About 85% of Saudi Muslims are Sunni. Islam influences Saudi Arabia's culture in many ways. For example, in part because Islam requires modesty, Saudi clothing keeps arms and legs covered. Men usually wear a long loose shirt, then often wear a cotton headdress held in place with a cord. Saudi women traditionally wear a black cloak and veil in public, although some now wear Western-style clothing. Saudi laws and customs limit women's activities. For example, a woman rarely appears in public without her husband or a male relative. Also, women are not allowed to drive cars. However, women can own and run businesses in Saudi Arabia. Government and economy. Saudi Arabia is a monarchy. Members of the Saud family have ruled Saudi Arabia since 1932. Most government officials are relatives of the king. The king may ask members of his family, Islamic scholars, and tribal leaders for advice on its decisions. The country has no elected legislature. Local officials are elected, but only men are allowed to vote. Saudi Arabia's economy is based on oil. In fact, Saudi Arabia has the world's largest reserve of oil and is the world's leading exporter. Because it controls most of oil, Saudi Arabia is an influential member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. Founded in 1916, OPEC is an international organization whose members work to influence the price of oil on world markets by controlling the supply. Oil has brought wealth to Saudi Arabia. The country has sizable middle class, and the government provides free health care and education to its citizens. Even so, Saudi Arabia faces economic challenges. For example, it must import much of its food because fresh water needed for farming is scarce. The country uses desalination plants to remove salt from seawater, but this requires an extremely expensive procedure. Another economic challenge for Saudi Arabia is its high unemployment rate. One reason for its lack of jobs is the high population growth rate. More than 40% of Saudis are younger than 15. Another reason for unemployment is that many young Saudis choose to study religion instead of the technical subjects their economy requires. Other countries of the Arabian Peninsula. Saudi Arabia shares the Arabian Peninsula with six smaller countries. Like Saudi Arabia, these countries are all influenced by Islam. Also, like Saudi Arabia, most of the monarchies and economies based on oil. Kuwait. Oil was discovered in Kuwait in the 1930s. Since then, it had made Kuwait very rich. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait to try to control the oil, starting the Persian Gulf War. The United States and other countries defeated Iraq, but the war caused major destruction to Kuwait's oil fields. Although Kuwait's government is dominated by a royal family, the country did elect legislature in 1992. Only men from certain families, less than 15% of Kuwait's population, had the right to vote in these elections. However, Kuwait recently gave women the right to vote. Bahrain and Qatar. Bahrain is a group of islands in the Persian Gulf. It is a monarchy with legislature. Bahrain is a rich country. Most people there live well in big modern cities. Oil made Bahrain wealthy, but in the 1990s the country began to run out of oil. Now banking and tourism are major industries. Qatar occupies a small peninsula in the Persian Gulf. Like Bahrain, Qatar is ruled by a powerful monarch. In 2003, men and women in Qatar voted to approve a new constitution that would give more power to elected officials. Qatar is a wealthy country. Its economy relies on its oil and natural gas. The United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates, or UAE, consists of 7 tiny kingdoms. Profits from oil and natural gas have created a modern, comfortable lifestyle for the people of the UAE. Partly because it's so small, the UAE depends on foreign workers. In fact, it has more foreign workers than citizens. Oman and Yemen. Oman covers most of the southeastern part of the Arabian Peninsula. Oman's economy is also based on oil. However, Oman does not have the great oil wealth of Kuwait or the UAE. Therefore, the government is attempting to develop new industries. Yemen is located on the southwestern part of the Arabian Peninsula. The country has an elected government, but it has suffered from corruption. Oil was not discovered in Yemen until the 1980s. Oil and coffee generate much of the national income, but Yemen is still the poorest country in the Arabian Peninsula.